Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to start in a couple of seconds, so if you can take a seat, we'll go ahead and start our event. And thanks to those who are waiting online as well. We're starting briefly. And we would love to have our slides up as well. I can see the tech team at the back if you can help us. Thank you. I can see people still walking in. Welcome. I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ines Yavar. I am from Peru, and I work for Restless Development as Global Youth Power Manager, and also I am a Next Generation Fellow with the UN Foundation. And today, I'm going to be co-moderating with Veronica.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Today we would like to start with introducing to you to someone. Having her here today is such an example of what youth is doing here, the impact that we are having. So she is the first official youth envoy for the COP27 president and a plastic and reconstructive surgery resident from Egypt. She has more than 7 years of experience in climate change and facilitated over 74 hours of training sessions and workshops in 15 countries across the world. She is a commissioner at the Lancet Chatham House Commission on Post-COVID Population Health, a youth sounding board member of the AU DG INTPA, an associate of Women Leaders for Planetary Health, and a member of the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety and UNICEF ACED Youth Leaders Program. She has attended the last 3 UN climate change conferences in Katowice, Madrid, and Glasgow, representing more than 1.3 million medical students worldwide in the International Federation of Medical Students Association. Please welcome on stage Omnia El Omrari, Youth Envoy for COP27 President.
So hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And it's so important to acknowledge the importance of how climate change education is such a powerful tool. I remember when I started 6 years ago, and that was when I was a second-year medical student, and I was empowered to learn about climate change and its impact on health, which at first was such a very niche topic, and many people did not understand how climate change affects human health, especially the health of the younger generations, disproportionately, especially the health of young women and girls. When we're thinking about air pollution, and then when we're thinking about extreme weather events led by climate change and the high rates of mortality and morbidities, especially in young women and girls. And at the same time, what empowered me to learn about climate change, to advocate, to be passionate, is being part of a student-led movement that advocated for climate education and literacy. And I know that today we are celebrating and sharing the success stories of many youth-led groups and organizations that led their own climate education. Because we all know that when we were at school and at university, climate change was not there in our core curriculum. One of the main areas I was passionate about before I started my work as an envoy is how to integrate climate change in my own curriculum, in my own faculty, because I believed as students we are also change agents in our own communities. We need the right tools, competencies, and knowledge to drive and the public pressure that is necessary for climate action, to also drive the willingness and the understanding to drive and lead our own climate solutions. We understand the science behind climate change. We know that time is not on our side. We know that delaying further action is going to cost us our lives as well as the lives of the younger generations. We need to understand the solutions and the science to really build our own solutions from the ground. We are not going to wait for our leaders to take action. We are already leading our own innovative solutions with such untapped potential, and that is why climate education is fundamental. And you can see now this COP is very special because just yesterday we had the very first session for children and adolescents where we gave them the stage to voice their own actions and their own solutions, and we invited the policymakers from both the signatories of the UNICEF Declaration on Child Rights and Climate Change, and they were discussing with them how can we accelerate climate education, how can we empower children and adolescents to learn about climate change, and then taking it into how the climate crisis is a child rights crisis, and it is within our own capability, our own responsibility as young climate leaders and activists to empower the younger generations, looking at their own education, looking at the capacity building of members of our own age group and our own demographic, because we are 1.6 billion around the world. We are the biggest demographic. We bear the most impacts, but we also have our own solutions to the climate crisis. So I know that this session is about you as well, about sharing your innovative climate literacy tools. And I believe that, yes, our education, especially the education of young women and girls, as was predicted just last year in COP26, is going to be affected. The Malala Foundation made a study and it estimated that by 2050, if we continue on the inadequate climate pledges and the lack of political inaction towards climate change, over 12.5 million girls around the world will not access the education that they need. And this gap, I see very clearly how we, as youth-led groups and youth-led organizations, in collaboration with our governments, with our UN agencies, and with our youth allies, we are changing the curricula, we are changing the education both in an informal and in a formal manner. And I think that this COP is also important because we are finalizing the ACE, which is the Action for Climate Empowerment program, and really we need to integrate the solutions that we are doing on a local, regional, and global level to be part not just of the deliverables of the work program that focuses on climate education, but to be part of the monitoring and the evaluation mechanism. We also need to infiltrate the process of the global stocktake, which is the single and most institutionalized space that the UNFCCC has created to assess whether countries are on the right track when it comes to their commitments or not. Education and action for climate empowerment is a key pillar for that. So we need to put in our voices and our own KPIs or indicators, whether the countries are developing their plans, implementing it in a way that is youth sensitive, in a way that is integrating the local efforts that are being put, in a way that is also integrated climate education as a means of empowering action and accelerating implementation. So thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm here. I'll be back again for any questions, as well as for anything that I can do in my own position to accelerate our work and integrate our voices, because this is the first time that there is a youth pavilion. There is a pavilion and a youth envoy, and the aim for that is to really link in the needs and the works of our organizations directly into the presidency, which facilitates the negotiation process. So really, I'm very happy to also listen to what you would like us to share and to have in the outcome for COP27 this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omnia, for that opening segment. I would like to welcome you all again if you joined in the middle of that speech, and also those of you watching online, welcome to our event. This event is co-organized by multiple organizations, and we'll be hearing from young people from these organizations in just a bit. Just in case you walked in and you don't know what this event is about, it's transforming education for sustainable development through youth climate action. And so that you know what to expect, we're briefly going to have a quick energizer, so get ready to be a bit awake so that we can then hear some speeches from young people from the different organizations that are organizing this event, and I can actually put on a slide so that you can see them. We will have Tuto Lucy Matobo from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. We will have Kazi Zubair Hossein from the World Organization of the Scout Movement, and Devika Chabra from Restless Development, who will come and talk about different initiatives they're working on that link these two issues, education and climate. After that, we'll have the privilege of having 3 separate conversations where these young leaders will be talking to decision makers and better understanding what they're doing to support this agenda and also how they're including youth. Unfortunately, at the last minute, Dr. Tarek was unable to join us, but we're thrilled that one of our closing keynote speakers is happy to join us on stage later on. So as we finish those 3 discussions, we will then be able to have some closing remarks from Dr. Elizabeth Steer from the Education Commission and Inkar Kadrizahova. Sorry about that. I should have practiced that name better, who is the Senior Natural Resource Officer of the Office on Climate Change, Biodiversity, and Environment. But as you've already been sitting here for about 10 minutes or a bit less, and are maybe already a bit sleepy from hearing our voice, I will invite Veronica to kick us off with a quick icebreaker.
Thank you so much. So we would like to bring up some energy here because this is a youth panel, okay? So we've been seeing this like interactive thing where I say a word and you respond. So the word that I will be saying will be youth, and then you will be saying power, okay? Everyone understood? So I'll say youth, youth, youth. Okay, so be aware because we can do this anytime, so you should be on point. So yeah, we would like to start by getting us into the same context, getting to know each other. So please, I would like the people that are in the back to come here, take the front seats, because we are just getting closer. We're just getting to know each other. And the activity is that you will turn to the closest person next to you, the person that you have nearby, and you will ask 2 important questions, okay? So the first one is, what did you have for breakfast? It's very important to have breakfast, please. And second, you will ask about, or you will start a conversation about what do you think, or why do you think climate is its relation with education, okay? So those 2 questions, you will have about 4 minutes to start a conversation, getting to know each other. First question is breakfast, then climate and education. Why is it important?
For those of you who are online and you don't have someone next to you, you can definitely write in the chat so that we see what you had for breakfast and also the link of these issues. If anyone has just joined us and is confused, you're welcome to join someone else and discuss with them the link of education and climate or what you had for breakfast. And we'll be back in just a minute. I hate to break off conversations. You have 20 seconds to finish what you were just saying before we move on to the next part of our event. Youth, youth, youth. Well done. Great, I got your attention. So I would love to move to the next part of our event now that we're all energized and also a bit chatty, but hopefully we do want to listen to these three amazing speakers who are going to come up and join me on stage. So please welcome them with a round of applause. Tuto Lucy Matobo, Kazi Zubair Hussein, and Devika Chabra. Please join us up on stage. You can all three come up, and we'll go through one by one. Welcome. So as mentioned, we're going to have them share about some of the experiences they have and different projects they're leading and working on. Just as housekeeping rule, we have told them they have a time limit. So I won't be rude, but if I start saying youth and you say power, it means that we're close to the end of their speech. Tuto, I would love to turn to you first from Girl-Led Action on Climate Change, which is a project that you work on. How is this project and program empowering girls to tackle climate change?
Wonderful. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tuto Lucy Matobo. I am a member of the Lesotho Girl Guides Association, which is a member organization of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So WAGGGS is the largest voluntary movement dedicated to empowering girls and young women in 152 countries. Our strengths lie predominantly in 4 initiatives. Firstly, innovative non-formal education programs, leadership development, advocacy, and community action. All of these strengths aim to empower girls and young women to develop the skills and confidence needed to make positive change in their lives, their communities, and their countries. WAGGGS has therefore implemented what we call the Girl-Led Action on Climate Change, which operates in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The GLAC program seeks to ensure that girls and young women are resilient to climate change and that we see a gender transformative approach to climate change policy and practice at all levels of governance. So one may ask, how does the GLAC program empower girls to tackle climate change? There are 4 main ways. Firstly, GLAC has developed non-formal curriculum in partnership with the Food Agriculture Organization, FAO, of the United Nations. We are educating 55,000 girls and young women on climate change and its gender dimensions. Second, each girl or young woman then shares the skills, information learned with at least 2 community members, and they take the lead in a community action project of their choice. Third, a select group of young women are then also trained and mentored to carry out advocacy campaigns at national level and to partake in global summits. As mentioned, the program is called the Girl-Led Action on Climate Change. Therefore, girls take the front row seat in the design and implementation of the program. In partnership with sponsors, WAGGGS financially supports national and local climate action. Lastly, the mentioned curriculum is tailored for each region. It is available in different languages, and it is suited to 3 different age groups. It is my pleasure today to be here speaking on behalf of 10 million girls worldwide. I look forward to further discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tutu. I would love to hear also from our next speaker, Kazi, who's working with the Scouts, and I would love to hear from your project in 5 minutes, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello. Okay. Thank you, Ines, for the question. Let me start with some facts because I am a researcher. So let me state some facts. Like, we are in a state where the current temperature is 1.2 degrees Celsius, increased before the pre-industrial level, and there are 3.3 to 3.6 billion people around the world who are vulnerable to the climate changes happening already now. And by COP26, 120 countries submitted their nationally determined contributions, which says what they want to do to reduce these problems. And by analyzing those reports, it is seen that 2.4 degrees Celsius is the tipping point which we will achieve in by the end of this century. So the target we set in our Paris Agreement, like 1.5 degrees Celsius or the 2 degrees Celsius, is not going to be held. And another interesting fact is that at this moment, 50% of the world population are under age 30. So the most adverse impacts of the climate change will be faced by the people who are now in younger ages, also by the young people who will be in the future generations. So Scouts intend to empower the young people by environmental education so that they can take actions in their local community and they can ask for their rights to have a better future. So we have different programs under a framework we call Better World Framework. And under Better World Framework, there is a very famous program of ours that is called Art Tribe, which consists of 4 different challenges, 3 different challenges now, and more challenges will be added in future. So our approach to environmental education is non-formal environmental education. That is, young people are learning about the nature by going to the nature, because with only the theoretical education, we cannot let them learn about the nature and environment and the adversities the Mother Earth facing now due to climate change. So this is almost like an experiential learning, where they are learning by doing. And in that tribe, we have 3 different challenges. Like, one challenge is for champion for nature, what we call. That challenge concerns with the biodiversity and our consumption behavior. And there is another challenge called plastic tide turners, which enlighten young people about the plastic pollution in their communities and inspires them to take action to reduce the pollution. And the third one is the Scouts Go Solar. These are the things we are doing under the Art Tribe program. So these programs are globally initiated programs, but these are implemented at the local level. Like, global knowledge is funneled down to the local level, and then young people implements these programs at the local level so that the community can be benefited by this program. And all the programs follow a learning path, which is like, at first the young people have to know about what the problem, so many flies, what the problem their community are facing regarding the environment. So they will have to be aware of the problems, then they will have to cooperate among themselves and also with the other community members, and they will have to take the action. So this is a three-step journey which young people are taking in our Scout movement through our tribe. And also when we are talking about the climate change issue, it is a cross-cutting issue. So it is not only confined in the environmental education area. So there is peace, human rights, and all other things. So we have another program which is called Messengers of Peace program. So people also, young people around the world also working there with the Messenger of Peace program with the peace and environment thing. So we have almost 57 million young people around the world in 172 countries, and out of these 172 countries, National Scout Organization, 83% National Scout organizations are implementing youth programs that have included sustainability and environment in their youth programs nationally. So these are the more or less update from my side. And about talking about the benefit of the non-formal education, I am a good example for that because I have not been taught about the climate change in my classrooms. I have been taught about the climate change in my Scout group. So I think it is a good way to empowering young people to take climate action at the local communities by implementing the non-formal educational approach. So thank you everyone. I hope I have not overshot the time limit.
Thank you, Kazi. You didn't at all, but just since you reminded us, we can practice. Youth. Youth. Okay, people are still awake and we're ready for our last speaker for now. We have Devika Chabra, the Youth Climate Champion from Restless Development. You also have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is often said it takes a village to raise a child. I believe it takes a village to tackle climate change. The African proverb could not be more suitable, and not just geographically because we're currently in the continent, but quite literally. Well, it really does take a village of people, and today I'm going to tell you why. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Devika Chabra, representing Restless Development India as a Youth Climate Champion from the Youth Climate Action Lab program. Now, through the Youth Climate Action Lab, we're addressing the issue of climate change while trying to bring in the voices of the informal settlement groups into the decision making. They form a very crucial percentage of the population, and more often than not, they're the ones to face the impacts, the adverse impacts of climate change, while being the population who has done least to contribute to it. As a youth climate champion, I work in the community of DJ Halim. It's one of the largest slums in Bangalore, India. Now, DJ Hali is composed by a majority of immigrants from neighboring and far-off villages who came to the urban city of Bangalore in search of better opportunities. My work as a youth climate champion involves identifying the key issues related to climate change in the community, understanding its impacts on the inhabitants of the community, and involving these people, these marginalized people, into the decision making. Now, I'd like to share a small anecdote from one of my interactions with the community. During one of the sessions with the youth of the community, I asked everyone to describe what climate change means, as many of them had not heard the term before. Now, majority of the answers revolved around the same thought, and I'd like to quote: "Climate change refers to the changes that are sometimes, I repeat, sometimes, seen in the environment when the weather is different. This inaccuracy tells us about the necessity for climate education. Further, this is just one community, and we can only possibly imagine the number of people all over the world who have not received the privilege to climate education." Through the Youth Climate Action Lab program at Restless Development, we concentrate on 4 basic models. 1, youth-led advocacy. 2, youth-led accountability. 3, youth collective. And 4th, youth fund. Now, through the first two models, we aim to bring in the voices of the informal settlement groups to decision-making platforms. Through the Youth Collective, we aim to foster greater connections around climate change and fair urban transition. We bring in more grassroots-level organizations and support youth initiatives to accelerate coordinated action on climate action through the Youth Fund. According to the United Nations, about 1 billion people live in informal settlements who have primarily moved from their villages to urban areas. It is these people from near and far villages who are at the forefront of the impacts of climate change. And it is these people who should be included in the decision making. Hence, actually, it really does take a village indeed. More often than not, when we talk about climate change, we associate the word youth with the power that the collective exuberates. The word implementation, we associate to the decision makers and other stakeholders, such as high-level officials, governments, funders, etc. Well, now I'm going to really request each one of you to really think about this for a moment. It is, after all, the Y-O-U, you in youth, and the I in implementation that tells us just how incognoscible these defined roles are. It is not just my representation as the youth. You are a part of it too, just as how I, as the youth, am responsible for the implementation and not just the government and other stakeholders. Now, this is for you, decision makers. I can have as much power as you, and you can have as much passion as the youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. I will pass now to Veronica to moderate the next part.
So thank you very much to all our youth leaders. We love to hear about you, getting to know your organization and your work, the work that you're doing. Now, following our agenda, we would like to Tuto to stay and our other two youth leaders to take their seats, because now we'll start the high-level pair conversations. So in these, the leaders that you just met will have the opportunity to go into a deeper conversation with the amazing actors that we have invited today. So in rounds of 10 minutes, they will have the opportunity to start a conversation relating their work and the work of each of our guests. So please, we would like to introduce to you our first pair. Our first actor holds a degree in economics from the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México and a master's degree in public policy from Princeton University. She has 15 of experience in the public sector, having held various positions in the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit, the Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation, and the Ministry of Social Development. Currently, she serves as a General Director of Global Issues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where her main function is to promote, disseminate, coordinate, and negotiate Mexico's position in forums related to the multilateral agenda of a cross-country nature, such as global governance, environment and natural resources, climate change, Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, food security, economic development, among other issues. Please welcome with a round of applause to the stage to Camila Cepeda, Mexico's Chief Negotiator for Climate Change and Diversity, and her pair, youth leader, Tudo Matobo, from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts.
Thank you very much, Veronica. It is indeed an honor to have you here today, Camila, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and be part of this panel. So without any further ado, let me dive right into it. We have a series of questions lined up for you that we'd like to engage more with you. So the first question is, what is Mexico doing to connect youth and climate change education?
Thanks. And before going into the questions, first of all, let me congratulate you. There's a fly here over here. Let me congratulate you because I know there were so million of women that you're being trained, and that's amazing. And just the work you're doing on empowering, I think it brings a lot to the table, and just I'm really happy to connect and hear more about the program, and just making sure that we can have a network of youth people. I think that's extremely valuable to push for your objectives. But yes. And from Mexico, so first of all, we have it in our constitution. In the third article of our constitution, education, environmental education is a right, and that's a guarantee. So that is a first major step to make sure that we have in the curriculum of schools climate and environmental ideas that can foster then the action of our youth. But it's not just about education. We need to empower them and have them part of the solutions. We need to make sure that they're in consultations, that they are an active voice, that they can engage in fruitful discussions. And in that sense, particularly for youth, we believe that they need to have a stronger voice within climate negotiations. Not just in side events. Of course, side events are extremely valuable, but they need to be at the table where decisions happen. And that is of great importance. And that's why we believe that we need to provide them with the necessary tools to have an active and meaningful participation. So we're now on our second edition, and here Veronica is part of the first generation. So she was part of Operación COP, Youth Ambassadors for Climate, when we made an open call for young people between the ages of 18 and 25 that could show their activism and their commitment to climate action. And we designed a program of 3 months with our diplomacy school, with experts from the ministers that are involved in climate negotiations, from finance, from agriculture, from environment, from human rights, from gender issues. And we had in-depth sessions with them. It was virtual because of the pandemic, but it ended up being a good option because we could have people from all over the country and not just like Mexico City where we're based. So we had lectures on each of the topics that would be dealt in the negotiations, so not just these broader issues, but then going into Article 6 and transparency and the mitigation work program, like the various topics that we are dealing in these conferences of the parties. And it was just not a lecture, but then we had a space for them to ask questions, to interact, to have a dialogue, to make sure that we could sort of enrich the experience with their concerns, with their questions, with their suggestions, and that also experts could hear back from what they were saying. So we had a 3-month program, and out of those we selected 4 to come to COP as part of our delegation. Not as party overflow, not as note taker, not as observer, but as a lead negotiator. So we had last year a very successful experience where now our youth, they're not here because they're negotiating. So they're leading on adaptation, on loss and damage, on Article 6, and on the Action for Climate Empowerment agenda. So they're the ones sitting behind the name Mexico and speaking on behalf of our country. But we took them part of the whole national process, not just like, oh, it's the last week, then come. Like, they took part of all our meetings within our federal government to make sure that they could propose ideas and propose texts and be part of the solution. And now they're here and it's a reality. And we're very proud of that because they've done an amazing job. And we hope that if
Mexican people are around, because it is for Mexicans, sorry, that it's just for our country, but if people are joining in line and want to apply, we will have an opening call next year again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camila. And I'm indeed sure that even the decision makers that are watching right now can draw some inspiration from the good work that you were doing. Thank you for sharing that. And my next question literally goes to the collaboration aspect. Word has it that you are collaborating with other partners. Who are these allies? And can you share the benefits of collaboration with them?
Yes, so for this specific program, we're working with Climate Reality Project. You might have heard of this organization. They sort of sponsor for climate leaders all around the world. And one great idea of collaborating with them is that we can extend and expand the network of our youth. Right now, we're developing a larger program based on the experience of Mexico with other Latin American countries. So this year around Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica have delegates as part of their delegations as negotiators. And now we're sort of sharing that awareness, and we're hoping that because Climate Reality Project has a network all over the world, that maybe more countries can come and just share those ideas so that they might replicate the program. We think that it's a very fruitful network that hopefully it becomes larger and larger. And each time we partner also with the country host and their embassies. I mean, we want to make sure that now, for example, with Egypt, that they have a youth envoy, that we know that that we have our youth engaging and trying to connect them with other realities, other conceptions, because Latin American youth has very different concerns than maybe the Arab youth, you know, and the African group. So the idea of partnering is also expanding their horizons and their thoughts.
I love how you mentioned that it's all about also expanding your horizon, because that's actually what we want to do under our WAGGGS program as well, to expand our horizon. Our last question is more related to one of our key demands. So one of our key demands as young representatives is to be recognized as allies in the achievement of our country's national adaptation plans due to the work that we do on capacity building. I would like to ask, what can we do as active civil society organizations to collaborate efficiently with government on implementation of national adaptation plans?
So this question will be different for each country, because unfortunately not all countries have legislation on public participation. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have now the Escazú Agreement, for example, that is an international legal treaty that guarantees 3 rights: access to information, access to public participation, and access to justice on environmental matters. So now countries in Latin America can demand their authorities, because it's now ratified and entered into force, that they need to make consultations for all plans and design environmental climate policies. So for example, in Latin America, you can now ask, say, like, hey, you have the Escazú Agreement, you're making your national adaptation plan, we want to be a part of it. You have to make consultations. That might not be necessarily the case all over the world, so that will be harder. But you have to reach your authorities, you have to reach as a collective group. As an individual, it's extremely hard. But since, for example, you have such a large network, you have a stronger voice, and you can ask, like, hey, we are a member of million of youth people, we want to be part of your consultations for national adaptation plans. So the stronger the voices, the more numbers you have, the stronger the voices.
Thank you very much, Camila. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you as part of our panel. Looking forward to further collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camila and Tudo. Before introducing to our second pair, I would like to say youth, youth, youth. Okay, so this conversation arose a lot of important points. I think that the part where Camila said education is a right, we need to take that. And also like the power that we have like in our collective voices. Let's not forget that. Thank you so much again, both of you. We would like now to introduce you to our next pair. So our second pair of conversation round, we're happy to introduce you to someone amazing. As he has joined the GEF Biodiversity and Land Degradation Unit as a communication and advocacy expert. He previously worked with WWF, where he most recently led the policy and advocacy team for WWF Singapore. Prior to that, he worked in the advertising industry in London for nearly 10 years. He is British, but remains confused about where home lies. He was born in Vienna, grew up in Tokyo, and has since lived in the UK and Singapore. He currently lives in Singapore with his fiancée and their adopted dog and 2 cats. Please give another round of applause for Michael Alexander, Communications and Advocacy Expert, part of the GEF Biodiversity Unit of the United Nations Environmental Program. And his conversation pair, Cassie Suber, Youth Leader for the World Organization of the Scouts Movement. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Michael, for joining us in this short conversation. I hope it will be an insightful conversation. So I'm very happy that Michael was also a scout. So let's jump into the question. So Michael, from my side, the first question to you is how United Nations Environment Program has been empowering youths around the world through environmental education.
Hello. Is that good? Okay. Do you know, I'm a little bit conflicted about answering this question because when I look at the youth in this room today and some of the youth that we've met through UNEP or involved in the COP processes, you're already so empowered. Like you're schooling us, basically. Like UNEP is behind you, the adults are behind, and we need to be in front helping you along, and hopefully UNEP is doing something towards that. But I think about my time when I was a scout growing up in Tokyo in the Boy Scouts of America as a British citizen, very, very confusing. But, you know, I remember one of the things we always did was about raising awareness. We always raised awareness. And when we went out to beach cleanups, we cleaned up the beach. We did all that stuff that people still do today. But there was one key word that I think every single one of your slides had up there, and it was advocacy. And I think that shift from when I was a youth talking about awareness to what I always hear from youth now talking about advocacy is just so impressive because you're much further ahead, the depth of the questions that you're asking. So honestly, I just have to give you a round of applause. Yeah. So I know it's a bit cheesy, but I really am impressed. So in terms of what UNEP is doing, so we look at it in terms of both the formal education sector and some of the non-formal work that we can do, right? So through the formal education sector, we're working with universities, and we so far have about 1,100 universities who signed up to the race to net zero. We've also trying to not forget then the biodiversity component. We've got Montreal COP coming, CBD COP 15 coming up soon. So we are also working on a Nature Positive Alliance, and we're just one of many organizations trying to contribute to that. But I think within that, there's a kind of philosophical change, right? Because we know that 20%, I think the last study is less than half of education programs worldwide, curriculums, include climate as part of a key core component. Less than 20% for biodiversity, and we have to fix that. So on top of doing work with the formal education sector, there's other stuff we can do as well. So gaming is a huge new opportunity that, quite frankly, I don't think everyone at UNEP understands quite fully yet. But that has the potential to hit 1/3 of every, one in three people on this planet. So we have an alliance with some of the major gaming networks and companies called Playing for the Planet. And we also work with Scouts. So Kazi, you talked about it already. The Tide Turners programs, alliances between Scouts and UNEP. As an ex-Panda, I worked for 5 years with WWF. It was great to see some of the pictures on there, because that was some of the partnerships that WWF has with WOSM and WAGGGS as well. So there's a lot that can happen there as well. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, very well. Thank you. So I think we can move to the next question. So the next question is how UNEP envisions future of the environmental education for youths. Like in coming days, how UNEP is reshaping the things with the environmental education.
So I think there has to be a philosophical shift, right? And I've kind of touched on that before. But it's about working with not just the curriculum programs that I've mentioned. And by the way, it's not just youth calling for this. I can count any number of studies that talk to the vast majority of youth who want climate education, environmental education as a whole to be better embedded into their programs. I think there's a horrible tension that it's quite a privilege to be environmentally educated. And the ones who are suffering from the impacts of environmental degradation are the ones who learn the least about it, because their educational systems don't have the privilege of learning about that stuff. So that's something that we have to fix collectively. So it's not just youth who are calling for that, and UNESCO did a study recently talking, I think it was 70% of youth calling for that. Oh no, sorry, 70% of teachers are also calling for this. So students want it, teachers want it, it has to happen. And we're starting to see some shift. And I think, honestly, I was speaking with a couple of youth delegates just last night at an event I'll talk about in a moment, that 2 years ago, the involvement of youth, it's still not good enough in these COP processes. And by the way, that stuff that Mexico's been doing is fantastic, so very well done. It's drastically improving year on year, and that's because of the pressure that you put on the non-youths of the world. I've lost my train of thought now, but hopefully I've covered that.
Yeah, I also hope that most of the part has covered my question. So I'm moving to the third one, as I have seen that you are an advocacy expert. So from the advocacy perspective, I have a question. How do you think youth advocacy is contributing to tackling the climate change thing?
So when I worked at WWF, is about the time that the Fridays for the Future movement under Greta came to life, right? As a communicator at the time with WWF, before I got more into a policy and advocacy space, I have to be honest, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed for the people that I work for the adults of the world who've been trying to do this. Greta and the movement that then followed, that was already there before Greta, by the way, I appreciate that. Greta's the poster child for it, but there was a whole movement there underlying that. You did what we couldn't do. With all the money and all the resources that large organizations, large international NGOs, large intergovernmental organizations, you did in a matter of months what we've been trying to do for decades. I was embarrassed as a communicator, as an adult. So what do I see as the future involvement of youth? Was that the question?
Yeah.
I think you're already schooling us, as I said. I'm so impressed by it. I think the adult world, if I can call it that, is quickly catching up. But youth have made it very clear. They will not accept anything less. They're feeling it. When I grew up as well, people would say, oh, I do this good stuff for the world because I worry for my children, but not even our children anymore. We're all feeling it. So it's for your future. It's also, I'm feeling it. So this is a reality for you, and I just hope that the next COP and the COP after that, in fact, maybe we should just get rid of all the adults altogether, because they don't really know what they're talking about half the time anyway. So the youth are the future. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but when I said this at a talk the other day, but when I was a youth, I thought I was really cool. I thought I was really woke. I thought I had all the answers. I have nothing on what youth today have. There's a depth of thinking that I would never have got to. Just one last point I forgot to mention, which is really bad of me, but one thing that also UNEP is working on with many partners, including the International Labour Organization, with partners like LinkedIn, is about greening the jobs market. Because the question I hate getting, as someone who's worked with WWF and UNEP, is how did you get this job? And I always have to say, honestly, it's hard work. You have to keep applying. I applied, it took me over a year before I got into working with UNEP, a couple years actually. So there's this program called Green Jobs for Youth Pact, which is not just about creating 1 million new jobs in the green space. It's about reskilling and upskilling existing jobs, and about recognizing and supporting green entrepreneurs as well. So I have hope for initiatives like that. But thanks, please keep pushing the world to be a better place.
Thank you, Michael, for your insightful answer. We are looking forward to do more programs with the UN environment, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, Cassie, for such an inspiring conversation. I think that we all agree on that. Is it true? Okay, so youth, thank you so much. I really agreed with you totally when you spoke about the need on this shift of our education programs and how we need to change the approach that we have on them. Also, like the fixing this side of climate education as a privilege totally touched my heart. So now we invite you to take, their seats, so we can continue with our third and last round of pair conversations. For our next pair, I want to introduce you to our guest. Our guest is, she was appointed UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education in May 2018, becoming the top UN official in the field. In this position, she provides a strategic vision and leadership in coordinating and monitoring the implementation of Education 2030 Agenda encompassed in Sustainable Development Goal 4. During her term, she has given fresh inputs to multilateral and bilateral partnerships, including through the establishment of the Multilateral Education Platform, increased global focus on education's ethical role in providing learners with the skills to respond to 21st century challenges, heightened attention to the responsibility of universities in achieving sustainable development goals, and fostered closer relations between education, culture, and the social and natural sciences. She affirmed UNESCO's leadership in the context of COVID-19 response, the most profound disruption to education in recent history, through global evidence, guidance, policy dialogue, and collaborative work with UN partners to support countries and jointly advocate for prioritizing education in the recovery. She has encouraged mission-oriented approach with public and private partners to build resilience and reimagine education, including through the Global Education Coalition. With an academic background in the humanities, Ms. Ginani has served as rector of the University of Forense of Perugia, being one of the first and youngest women to hold this position in Italy. As Senator of the Republic of Italy and Minister of Education, Universities and Research, she developed and implemented a structural reform of the Italian education system, centered on social inclusion and cultural awareness. She has also been closely involved in an advisory capacity with European Commissioner for Research and Innovation. So please give a round of applause for Ms. Stefania Ginani, Assistant Director General for Education of UNESCO, and her pair. Thank you.
And we will change the slide, as we mentioned at the start, and I see some people have come in. Unfortunately, Dr. Tariq, who was going to be Devika's pair, was unable to join us last minute, and we're so grateful that you have stepped up and wanted to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, I have to shorten my CV on the website. That's the very first. Maybe Michael can help to that. Thank you for having me.
So firstly, I would like to say thank you so much for being here with us today. And I am absolutely honored to have this conversation with you. So one of my very first questions that I have is that your passion for education is it just really brings out from your work itself. But I would like to ask you, what does education mean to you personally?
Thank you. Good question to start. Okay, education is awareness for sure, is knowledge, is freedom, mostly. It's freedom, because when you know, when you have a better knowledge of how the reality and the world is going, you can choose. And most importantly, education is power. I think it's the most important tool to have the power of choice. And that's why UNESCO, as you maybe know, has been the organization since many years as the guardian of the world to introduce this notion of education as a basic human right. We have the right to be educated, as we have the right to be healthy, as we have the right to express our beliefs, as we have the right to vote, and many other important human rights. So, not by chance, when the UN launched this amazing agenda for a better world, to protect the planet, for prosperity and people, the goal number 4 was about inclusive quality education for all. So I think education is what can really change the world.
Thank you so much for your answer. It's extremely powerful and really beautiful that you know how you linked it to freedom. Now my next question to you is that at COP27, for the first time, we have a youth and children's pavilion, and we have received great response for it because there are people saying that it's the heart of COP. Now, how do you think that education could be brought about, or how could we lay more emphasis on education at COP28?
This is my second COP. I was in Glasgow last year, very happy and also a little bit proud to be one of the promoters, as my organization being, of course, of the very first meeting between ministers of education and ministers of the environment, who usually are not so used to dialogue and to share the same agenda. So Glasgow COP26 has been the starting point. Youth were very much involved, as you know, Youth for Climate, Friday for Future, within the building and outside the building. You know, there were two different kinds of conversation. I'm very happy to see that COP27 actually brought within the building, in the program, young people leading and asking for being listened to, and also for being part of the decision-making process. So this is already a good progress. However, I would say that education, when it comes to education for climate change, when it comes to include education as a part of the solution and not something nice to add in many side events, we are not still there. I mean, we had yesterday a very intensive day, jumping from one event to another to promote a clear UN roadmap. I will come to that later, on greening education and making climate change education a real structural pillar of the transformation we need for a better society. Having said that, education is not yet structurally part of the COP. So my wish and my call clearly, and my colleagues from the UN absolutely are on the same page, and we are working together for that, to have Dubai 23 at COP 28, including education as part of the official program, and to have education according, by the way, and following Article 12 of the Paris Agreement within the negotiation. It's not, a kind of accessory to the main program. But we are making a progress, and also thanks to your speaking very loud and not giving up.
Thank you so much. That's incredible, and I think we can all hope that COP28 is going to include everything that you just mentioned. My next question is that how do you think we can foster the important linkages between climate crisis and education, especially at a time when we're seeing a rise in induced displacement and migration of people?
The impact of climate change on schools, education system is huge. I can mention a couple of data I have in my mind coming from some research that my colleagues are doing. In 2019, the number of children and youth affected by climate change in their own right to education, so to say deprived totally or partially, were 24 million and something. Last year, there were already 30 million and something. So it's an increasing number. It's not anymore a question of specific regions where the natural disaster is hitting the most vulnerable most, by the way, like now Pakistan recently, Nigeria, and many other regions of the world where we see concretely this happening. It's very much also those regions where climate change is affecting, I can say, in a more silent way, like some sub-Saharan countries where desertification is actually affecting the system of economy and society, and so as a consequence, education systems are very much left behind than they were before. So it's important to have a real integrated approach, both on the humanitarian side and when it comes to rethinking education and making schools resilient and places where children have to learn safe and to have to be provided with their own right to education. I think that there is still a lot to do, and that's why in the TESS, we are together in New York, if I'm right, the Transforming Education Summit, which is part of the title of this amazing initiative, and thanks for that here at COP, we decided to listen to you, to young people. You submitted to the Secretary General Guterres a youth declaration, and one of the main priorities you want to see in the coming years and months is education for sustainable development and climate change, which is not simply about better knowledge of what climate change actually means, which is important, of course, but it's a kind of holistic approach to transform education. Yesterday, we presented this initiative led by UK and Japan as member states who are keen to support this agenda, and UNESCO and the other agencies, including UNEP, and CCC, of course, as front runner, but we want to have really all member states behind us. And there are 4 pillars, very close to the practices that we heard in Uganda and in other countries. Greening schools, greening curriculum, greening teachers' capacity, and greening communities. So very simple agenda to be implemented. This is less simple than this, but of course we are very keen to develop.
Thank you so much. I think it sounds absolutely incredible, and we cannot wait to include more education and as the youth collectively work towards attaining these goals that we've set in this agenda. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
with us again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that incredible discussion, and thank you, Stefania, for stepping in as well last minute. We're so grateful to have you all here with us today, and I can't believe we're almost at the end. You've all been sitting down for a minute, and some people have joined, so don't be alarmed if people start shouting when I say youth. 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 Brilliant. Thank you so much for still paying attention. We have just a few more speakers and closing remarks. And as you will see, the slides are not updated because we had a last-minute change. But I would love to welcome to the podium Jenny Wilson, who is a communications officer for the United Nations World Food Programme in Rome and has previously worked for the Climate Coalition and Christian Aid on campaign delivery and global communications. She is also a trustee at Restless Development. Welcome.
Thank you, Ines. And it's lovely to be here and to hear from some fantastic speakers. I really liked, Devika, your quote about how it takes a village to tackle climate change. I'm going to steal that one from you. And I was also in the Girl Guides, so that was very nice to hear about. So I think I was incredibly lucky when I was at school, and I'm still under 30, so it was not that long ago, but I did actually have some education about climate change. But I think it was mostly about the science of it, which is incredibly important, but we were never taught about what we can actually do to tackle it. Activism, advocacy, these weren't words that were used when I was at school, and so I think, that is what Michael was saying about how some of the young people in this room, you're so articulate and you know so much about this and you have those words, and we were never taught them, and I think so many people are still not being taught that, and that's incredibly important. And I often get asked what people can do about climate change. How can we as individuals contribute to tackling this issue? And of course, there's lots of things that we can do to reduce our own emissions and to contribute as part of the solution. But for me, the one thing I always say to people is awareness and education. If you can teach yourself, and it doesn't need to be formal education, if you can teach yourself about these issues and you can spread that knowledge and have that awareness, talk to your family and friends about it, that is one of the key ways that we are going to tackle this crisis. And we've talked a lot about how education is a right and the lack of access to education. And of course, this is a big part of climate injustice, and it's incredibly important. But I don't think we should underestimate the power of non-formal education. And one of the panelists was talking about it. And I think the education we get from each other is so important. I mean, I've learned more in the last hour than I have from all the panels I've been to in the last few days. So I think that is really fantastic. And one other thing I'd like to mention, we're talking about education and young people, but I think it's really important to mention women in that. And I'm not sure if some of you know, there were 110 heads of state who were here for the World Leaders Summit, and only 7 of those were women. And I think, I can't believe in 2022 that is still the case. So I think it's really worth mentioning that as well. So yeah, I mean, some great steps are being made. It was fantastic to hear from the youth envoy. We have the youth pavilion at COP. And we are seeing a lot of global leaders getting younger. If you see the stats of how old a lot of prime ministers and presidents are, they are getting younger in many countries. And I think that is fantastic. But of course, there's so much more that we can do. And I can't wait to see many people in this room in positions of power at future COPs. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and I hope for the same, more youth power in decision-making spaces. Please welcome to the stage our next speaker, Dr. Lisbeth Steer, who's the Executive Director of the Education Commission, chaired by the former UK Prime Minister and UN Special Envoy for the Global Education, Gordon Brown. She was Director of the Commission's report, The Learning Generation, and now oversees the Commission's global work around 5 key education transformations identified by this Commission. Please welcome her to the stage.
Thank you very much, and wow, youth is power. Sitting here is absolutely energizing. So I would like to summarize a little bit, that was what I was asked to do, and kind of bring together what we heard. We've heard some pretty devastating statistics in the last few days about the state of our planet, about climate and the impacts it has. And we know we're in a very deep crisis. We also know that poor people and people who are not educated are the most vulnerable in this crisis, and that they also are the least able to engage and be part of the solution. The examples today recognize that young people need the skills to be part of the solution. There will be no decarbonization and no adaptation without education. We should have that as a slogan. Unfortunately, a statistics we probably haven't heard over the past few days is that 70% of all young people who are ready to become economically active do not have basic literacy and numeracy skills to engage in the economy of tomorrow. That is 840 million young people between the age of 15 and 24. That is 840 million people who could be part of the solution. Yet, we don't hear about this crisis. It's the silent crisis at the COP27. Many of the solutions discussed at this COP focus on physical capital, natural capital, but human capital? That's the agenda that we all, as young people, need to be advocating for. And I was just talking earlier to one of the young advocates who was on the previous panel. The youth in the climate space should stand up and tell the leaders in this COP, this is what we want, the human capital. Let's focus on the human capital because we need that in order to save the world and to save our natural capital. So youth is indeed power. So what can we do? The Education Commission and Dubai Cares released a report at the UN General Assembly called Rewiring Education for People and Planet. And what we tried to do there is capture some win-win solutions. Kind of where could we act together and make progress? And climate literacy is one. We've talked a lot about climate literacy. We know that decades of overconsumption means that nature is being destroyed faster than we can regenerate it. We know that the way we live and interact with nature is determined by our education. So for people to act and to have a different relationship with nature, they need to be climate literate. And I think we've had a lot of wonderful examples of how this could be done. We need to understand our impact on the environment, and we need to understand the impact of the environment on us. We can, by doing so, not only teach people about the climate, but also empower them, and that's where the education system really needs to step up. We need to empower young people, not only remind them of how desperate things are, but also give them the tools to act and to become part of the solutions, to become agents of change in their communities. Unfortunately, I think earlier we heard about the NDCs. Not that many NDCs include climate literacy. I think the last count was about a third that mentioned climate literacy. It needs to become much more central. But I wanted to emphasize two other areas, because climate literacy is very important, but we also need, as young people and as educational sector, be part of two other areas. One is, I think someone mentioned it earlier, is the role of education in facilitating the system change that's needed to decarbonize. So actions to decarbonize our economies and protect and restore ecosystems are based on alternative paths, alternative economic trajectories. In order for that to happen, we need skills. Those paths are not going to happen because we wish them to happen. They need to be powered by people who have the skills to make them happen. And we have not really been part of the conversations on the energy transition, on the smart agriculture, on the other transitions that need to happen, the food systems transitions. So we need to think about what is going to happen to the poor farmer in Gabon or DRC, or his or her children? What skills do they have to change their livelihoods? How can they be part of the solution? There's no alternative economic growth path without education. And that is missed in the climate movement. The third area is, and that was also mentioned in the discussion here, is education as a lever for adaptation. And we already know that we're losing the battle on climate change, and we must adapt. Education is critical to help people adapt to climate change. There's evidence out there that shows that if you're educated, you're less likely to be affected. One study projects that there will be a 60% lower death toll from extreme weather events if girls and women in sub-Saharan Africa were educated. That is what we need to do. Adapt. There is no adaptation without education. So, are we ready for this? Transforming the climate, the food systems, the energy systems, we need to transform education. Education is one of the least reformed public systems in the world. It still runs on the basis of an industrial system. We need to change it, make it relevant to the problems that are being discussed today. We need to bring it into the 21st, the 22nd century, focusing on a new workforce for education, teachers, school leaders, community workers. We need to think about the digital transformation, and we need to think about how we're going to monitor and measure what we are learning as a society and how climate is impacting that learning. And a final point I would make, which my chair, Gordon Brown, cares about a lot, is we have to invest. Financing, we hear a lot about financing in this COP. Adaptation financing, mitigation financing. I had a discussion just an hour ago with a delegate of one of the big member states. She told me that education is not counted as an adaptation or mitigation investment. It is not counted by the OECD DAC rules that say that education is not adaptation, that's education. So this community, as they are trying to reach their targets, their financial targets, they are not thinking about education because they can't count it. So we need to engage about how are we going to count education as part of climate adaptation and mitigation. Thank you so much. We need young people to be standing up and bringing this message, and we're so grateful that you are doing this. We need you. Youth is
amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth Steer. And Jenny was mentioning earlier, we don't have that many women in decision-making spaces, but I think we have so many powerhouse women with us here today. And I'd like to welcome our last speaker, Inkar Kadi. Ooh, I butchered it again. Kadir Zahanova, Senior Natural Resources Officer at the Office on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at FAO. Before that, she worked at UN Women, UNFCCC, and UNDP on mitigation, climate resilience, and environmental management. Please welcome her on stage.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for giving me the floor. It is indeed a very inspirational meeting. I feel so energized, and I feel also very hopeful. A lot was said about the importance of education, importance of youth and empowerment, and I fully concur with all the statements. I represent the FAO, which is probably the largest technical agency in the UN that is working on food security and climate action in agri-food systems. We have started the process of supporting the youth empowerment about 25 years ago under the Climate Change Convention within the FAO, and also by partnering with the independent networks. And I'm happy to see that over this long period of time, the partnership has strengthened and started by merely inviting the representatives of youth organizations or individuals to come to the events, and now it has progressed into having dedicated programs and projects and MOUs with many partnerships, including with the WAGGGS and with the WOSM and with the GLAS. And also we started working on many various tools that reach out to thousands or hundreds of thousands of individual girls and women. So we're very proud of this work. But I also wanted to say that it's never enough. There's still a lot more that could be done. I want to congratulate all of you on the work that you have done so successfully. The examples that have been shared with us are really, truly impactful and inspirational. But I also want to share a few ideas of, or maybe recommendations or suggestions, the learnings that FAO has accumulated over the period of 25 years of working in this area. So what we have noticed is that it's important to create the opportunities for young people which give them the real empowerment. It is not enough to invite people to attend the events and workshops. It is important to continue working with them during this in between the sessions or the meetings by offering them the opportunities to apply their knowledge, to get the benefits from the mentoring support, to get the benefits from the capacity building in many different fields, not necessarily focusing purely on the technical skills, but augment this technical knowledge with the project management skills, with the speaking skills, with the skills, communication skills, advocacy skills. Only a well-rounded individual is truly able to pass across the message that is truly impactful and influential. We also have learned that it is important to provide the opportunities for action-oriented education. Understanding the science, the roots of the issues is absolutely important. But now we come to the stage when science is absolutely clear. It's important to know how to transform the scientific information into the actionable programs and projects. So action is really very important in the area of education. We also have noticed that it is important to support the individual action and try to drive the individual action into the civic movement. We have seen so many powerful examples of the community-led adaptation or the action at the level of the cities, but it is important to augment these effects and turn them into the movements that can truly make the change at the level of the certain jurisdiction, at the national level, for example. We also have noticed that it is important to provide the education not only in the area of climate and environment, but also look into the socio-economic and cultural implications and understand the behavioral science. We often know that there's a certain resistance on the side of many people, resistance to act, resistance to change. So it's good to understand why people are reacting to certain signals or why people are not taking certain actions, even though they are fully aware and they have the capacity to make the change. So the other learning is that it is still important to understand the evidence base. And it has been mentioned earlier that intuitively we all understand that education is necessary. The education must be supported. But then there are so many practical decisions that need to be made on the basis of what is the budget requirement for this education. We have to understand what is the impact of the education, how to transform the education programs into the programs that receive significant budget support. And this information is really very much important and relevant for so many ongoing negotiation streams that discuss the various financial gaps within the negotiation areas. And then the last point that FAO is very serious about is the power of partnerships. It is important to work not only with the technical experts, but also with the skilled educators and with the youth themselves, because not every technical information could be easily transformed into the education materials. It is important to understand that the education needs of different age groups vary, and we have to start with those who are very young, the ones who just about to enter their first year at school, and then progressively build the curriculum in such a way that there is the natural interconnection between the different levels of education, starting from the primary all the way to tertiary education. We also have seen the benefit of combining the formal and informal education tools and packages and courses. So maybe one last point that I want to say is that FAO is about to launch a new innovative program. We hope that it will be a very interesting development. We are going to work in Zambia on a large-scale project that is financed by the government of Germany on assessing the impacts of various types of education interventions starting from the primary to the tertiary education levels and collecting the evidence that could be useful not only for the countries themselves but for the rest of the world. So I wanted to conclude by congratulating all of you and by thanking you for inviting me to this event. It's a truly inspirational event, and as many speakers have said that indeed youth is power. Thank you.
Thank you so much for our last speakers. It was truly inspirational, and we have a lot of motivation out of everything that you have said. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our event. We really thank you all for being here, and we hope that you were here either in this room or online. You had a great time, you had a useful time, you find many interesting things. And finally, we would like to say that our youth leaders are here, like opening spaces for you if you want to connect, if you have more questions, if you want to know more about our associations or organizations. We are open to discuss whatever or talk about whatever team you want. And we also want to invite you to come to the stage, the high-level panelists and the youth leaders, to take a picture. And all our audience, please come to the stage so we can take a picture with our logo, Youth Power. So come on stage, please, and we will take the final picture. Thank you so much. Should we say one last? Youth? Power! Youth? Power! Thank you.